If we look beyond 2026 to 2027, will you advise or start vigorously shouting we should be taking less debt from next year? Or should we have a scheduled program whereby we say, okay, in the next 10, 15 years, this is what we should be hitting when it comes to being able to finance our budget?
That's why I was quite very optimistic when I spoke earlier about the new Minister of State for Finance. I saw that he was very honest while he tried to speak to the member of the National Assembly, but unfortunately, I really don't think whether they were able to see what he was saying. They were more interested in just allowing him to go and say they don't want him to come and lecture them on economy. But I think that lecture was actually very needed, because somehow the bigger problem that many of us have is that we see a nation that we think that is very rich but yet very poor.
This is soup business landscape. Nigeria spent, not just spending, 5.21 billion on external debt service in 2025. Nigeria, yes, we did. $5.21 billion servicing its external debt in 2025, accounting for more than 72% of the country's total international payment. 72% of our total international payment. This data is coming from the CBN. Now, figures published on the bank's website show external debt service payment rose from 4.66 billion in 2024 to $5.21 billion in 2025. This represents an increase of $551.86 million, or 11.9% year on year, highlighting the growing pressure of debt obligation on the country's foreign payment profile. Now, the rise occurred despite a slight decline in Nigeria's total international payments during the period, suggesting that debt servicing continues to take up a dominant share of the nation's external financial commitment. Okay. Our total international transactions for 2025, 72% of it went to debt service. I think that should sink in very much. And if we now ask ourselves what was the percentage of what we earned as a nation compared to what was in servicing debt, we should now start asking ourselves, how have we accumulated this debt, and to what extent has this debt that we've been accumulating paid off or will pay off in the long run? Dear Doc, I think I want to start with you on this. For the 2026 budget, we still have a high percentage, over 30% of debt that we will need to service the budget. If we look beyond 2026 to 2027, do you or will you advise or start vigorously shouting we should be taking less debt from next year? Or should we have a kind of a scheduled program whereby we say, okay, in the next 10, 15 years, this is what we should be hitting when it comes to being able to finance our budget?
I think that's why I was quite very optimistic when I spoke earlier about the new Minister of State for Finance. I saw that he was very honest while he tried to speak to the member of the National Assembly, but unfortunately, I really don't think whether they were able to see what he was saying. They were more interested in just allowing him to go and say they don't want him to come and lecture them on economies. But I think that lecture was actually very needed, because somehow the bigger problem that many of us have is that we see a nation that we think that is very rich but yet very poor. So he spoke yesterday about the over-ambitious budget of 2025, where, of course, we are not able to match our proposed expenditure with a revenue that was supposed to flow in. If you actually look at an analysis, because a lot of people have complained and say, oh, we didn't implement or there were no capital project fund release for 2025 because government for the first time did this or that. If you look at the projections, we were expecting into the consolidated revenue fund about 40 trillion naira as revenue for the federal government. But unfortunately, in that fiscal year, the federal government could only generate or raise about 10 trillion. So there was a deficit of about 30 trillion. And of course, there've been hue and cry over this because we made assumptions that, of course, the market reality itself could not support. So I think that is where we need to actually anchor some of the things that we are doing. You're talking about 72%. Don't forget that the tranches of the euro bond that government has taken in the last past months, most of them will be maturing as we get into 2027. So, which means there's a whole lot of payout that is also going to happen in 2027. So, what that means for us is that we have to cut our coat according to our cloth. That is quite very important. And then make realistic assumptions, especially about the things that we don't have control over. The price of crude, we cannot continue to say, oh, because it's sold $60 this year, let's think it will sell 62. We have to be cautiously optimistic to ensure that if the crude price is selling at $70 per barrel, where we are projecting our budget, we should be able to take about 30% off it so that we have to underestimate, in which case, if we now have surplus, then of course that can get into our sovereign wealth fund and of course help fund what happens in the near future. But for us to be benchmarking crude sale against the current market price, I think is overambitious. These are some of the things that we need to look at. Government will continue to borrow because we have to finance some of all these things that people are putting in the budget. Say, oh, I want road in my community, I want water in my community, but we cannot do all of this at the same time. And I really think that it is possible for people in the budget office to sit down and look at Nigerian development program for a period of 30 years, and so that we can prioritize things that needs to be done immediately, and then focus on those things within the range of the resource that we have. And then we can grow incrementally to resolve all our problems. So we cannot continue to take in so many projects that we don't even have the resource or the capacity to deliver at a particular point in time. That for me is what is actually resulting to this huge borrowing. Government must learn to live within its means, and that is quite important. Yes, there are pressures here, political pressures from those who contested elections, who are going back to their villages to go ask people for vote again. The people will be asking, oh, you didn't do anything in the last 4 years. But I think it is important that we explain to our people how government works. And then, of course, we can have hope that in the future, when things get better, things can actually reach us rather than over-promising and then put pressure on our finances and then our fiscal management get into trouble, which is exactly what we are going through right now. So the debt profile is getting out of hand, almost $100 billion in debt, although it's small. But when you look at it vis-a-vis our GDP, you see that it is massive debt for a country as poor as Nigeria. So we need to invest in things that are productive. How do we invest in things that we bring in more resources so that we don't need to rely on borrowing, whether it's through bond or treasury bills, to fund our budget. We will rely on the proceeds from tax, from royalties, and from levies and fines.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. You want to add your 2 cents to this?
Okay, so yeah, so basically, like Doctor said, I totally agree. We are not the only people in the world that are borrowing. If you look at other countries, we are baby compared to US and other countries that are borrowing. I think the only country in the world that is standing almost debt free is China, because almost everybody is borrowing from them. But according to CBN, the African countries, developing countries, are servicing more than what they are taking in new loans. So they are paying about 741 billion between 2022 to 2024. So it means that a lot of developing countries, including Nigeria, so we're not the only ones in this boat. A lot
So
of
we
us.
should sing it, but
I'm
we're
just
not the only
telling you
one.
from Ghana, we South Africa, there's a lot of borrowing. And why are we borrowing? We are borrowing because we are trying to put in money into a lot of projects. So, for example, you look at the coastal road, you look at hospitals, you look at schools. These are facilities that need to be upgraded, and this is why we are borrowing. Unfortunately, the borrowing comes with a high interest rate, and so we are servicing a lot of cost. But there are other things that are going to cushion with time. One, it sure shows that, for example, Nigeria, our credit facility is very, very secure. It means that if anything is happening in the country, we can always take advanced loans, and a lot of other NGOs, non-governmental organizations, private funding projects are always very excited to extend their hands to us.
To borrow.
To even give us. So, for example, I think the last time US was talking about certain countries that they were going to give aid to, Nigeria was on the list because we have...
Why should we be in the list of people that take aid?
Let's be real.
Why should we not be on the side of giving others aid?
But what we are trying to say is because we are servicing our debt.
They are making money off you. You're not just
We
servicing
agree.
debt.
Because we have been able to service this debt effectively. These are the positives now. Because sometimes in life, don't just always look at the bad side. Because we are able to service this debt. Yes. Because we are able to service this debt, we are now open to more. And let's be honest, the common man on the street, most of the time, this is what they benefit from.
What,
These are
the loans?
aids. Yes, the aids.
Loans?
No, the aids that come in via the repayment plan of the loans.
Why should benefit to the citizen of any country be aids coming from another country? What happens to the government in all the countries?
Honestly,
what use are they?
Honestly, there's an African adage that says one person cannot train a child. It means that in every nation, it's a joint, you sit like this, do like this. It's a joint thing in every country. And that's why I started with the fact that even US borrows, UK borrows. So it's not like it is only Nigeria, it's only African countries that are borrowing. All over the world, they are borrowing to facilitate new projects, projects that are going to last the test of time. Sometimes you need to take loans. Good thing, we are paying back this loan. So we are not in a bad credit.
Definitely we are
But the government can do more. Right about now, we're trying to encourage the government that the ECA funds, which are the excess crude account funds, it should be more transparent. What are we using these monies for? Because for the next 2 weeks,
what are we using the money for?
Yes,
What stops them from saving it?
That's what we are saying. For the next 2 weeks, we are going to experience that because of the surge in crude oil prices. So Nigeria is going to experience at least some benefits from it. Unfortunately, the Buhari government had some agreements with some of the international companies like Mobil, Shell, and they have already signed off a huge percentage of our crude oil to them already. But good or bad, we are still going to experience some. So it's now time for these administrations to sit down and make sure that these funds are used very, very judiciously so that we can stop borrowing. The president also made a statement yesterday or the day before yesterday that, look, the government, we have reduced borrowing drastically, that he can beat his chest and say no state government is borrowing money to pay salaries now or do certain projects, which is a plus, which was not happening in the last administration. So it's baby steps, but we are getting better.
Well, baby steps that right now an adult taking baby steps needs to be spanked. Let's tell ourselves some basic issues that we need to address. There's those, like Doc said, there is no issue in borrowing, but the judicious use of those particular funds that are being borrowed, it's something that calls for concern. And African countries, we are seeing this burden of debt servicing. The person that is giving you knows that he's making money off you. That is for sure. So African leaders also need to be wise enough to put in these particular funds where, just like Doc will always say, it's going to be profitable to your country. And with time, bring in and pull in resources for you to even pay off those particular loans.